New analog machines, Euclidean sequencer, page looping, saving tricks as sounds, and more, all in the new Syntakt update. Let's have a look. So first of all, the new analog machines that were added are the same that they added to the Rhythm last year. So the groove that you now hear in the background is a groove that I created with just 4 analog tracks using only the new machines. They're really versatile and you can create some very cool sounds with them. Here's a little bit of that jam. But for now, let's first get into the machines and the parameters. So the machines that were added are the acoustic bass drum, acoustic snare, the synth chiptune machine, which is really great, and the hi-hat lab machine. So let's have a look. So let's begin with the chip machine. The chip machine is a very cool machine that also was added to the Rhythm, and I already made a video about that, but I'm still going to show you. Basically, we have the tune and the overdrive that we are familiar with, decay time, and we have a waveform parameter that scrolls through basic waveforms that we already know, but then it goes into noise, which is also tuned, as you can hear. Different animation waveforms, which I love because it's free movement without using any LFOs, and we still have 2 LFOs to play with. Pulse width. Then we get waveforms with a bit of noise in them, and you can see that they step through stages. And it almost sounds like a little arpeggiator. Because basically what happens is that four triggers get played, so to speak. So the original note and 3 offsets after that. And then we can determine the speed of those 4 or 3 or 2 or just 1. Which then gets extended, as you can hear. So you can see that this little bit of noise moves around. Yeah, my encoder is a little bit iffy, so it jumps around a little bit. You can see that it still steps through the noise. And we also get pulse width. And of course you could route an LFO to this and have true pulse width modulation, which is nice. And then we have the speed, which is the speed at which we run through these triggers, 4 triggers. So if we start adding the offsets, let's start with a simple minor chord. It can go very fast, also very slow. In hertz or clocked. So this one is actually quite nice if we add this to the sequencer and can play this. And now select one of the animation waveforms, which I really like. Free movement, baby. There you go. So that's basically the chip machine. Now you can create a lot of different things from this. You can, of course, go completely chiptune and create entire chiptune music with these 3 tracks. You can also create nice kicks because you get waveforms with a little click at the beginning. You can create chiptuney hi-hat, snares, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very versatile machine. In this groove that you heard at the beginning, I'm using it fairly simple, but I'm then using a lot of filtering and LFOs and the effects block to create a super nice, deep, hypnotic synth line, which basically this is, you can also hear, it's sort of an arpeggiator, you could say. It's not, but it has a similar effect, right? So that's the chip machine. Acoustic is also a very nice machine, and it's very versatile. Nothing stopping you from actually using it as a sort of awesome bass line, for instance, with a nice click attack on top, or maybe even a bit of punch. For example, but as a kick, it's also, of course, it's pretty good actually. Yeah, you can. It does sound quite realistic, I think. It's really well done. And I basically covered this in the Rhythm video I did. So it's kind of the same thing. Now the cool thing is what I like to do, give it a bit of drive, like so, and then use a high pass filter or a band pass filter, like so. You can really create some booming or punchy kicks, and a bit of envelope depth to add that click. Set this to 0 or 1. And different waveform we can try. Triangle is quite nice, for instance. So, just to give you an idea of how versatile this thing is. Huge amounts of bass. So, very nice. Let's move on to the next. So, next up is the snare drum. So, again, it's a fairly versatile machine. The only thing is that the noise you can never really remove, which, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can hear that even with this impact at 0 and the sweep depth at 0, we can still hear some noise. And even with the noise level at 0, still hear some noise. So, but still fairly versatile machine. If we open up the amp, like so, we can actually also use this as a wonky synth. Nice to add some overdrive to it. And of course we can use this as a nice bass line as well. That's the cool thing about Syntakt, is I really like to use percussive sounds for bass. And of course you can use this as a kick as well. Same thing, we can use the bass bandpass filter, but better yet for this one is using a high pass filter. There we go. So it's actually quite nice, right? And full distortion. Get this nice trouser flapping like that. It also sounds a little bit like a punch. Like it. The kick underneath is actually not that bad. Cool. I'm losing myself a little bit, but yeah, just a kick and a snare. There you go. You got some old school techno right there. Well, let's move on. Hi-hat lab. Yeah. Okay, so cool. The hi-hat lab is an interesting one. We get six oscillators that are cross-modulating each other. And yeah, basically all these radio signal kind of thing. And if you carefully pick some of these frequencies, because these are all frequencies, as you can see, you can create some nice and a little bit of overdrive, of course. You can see, sizzling. It's not that bad. It's pretty good. I mean, it's a bit harsh. I think if we use some LFOs, interesting hi-hats. We get some of that sharp high off of there. We can also use one of the low shelf, for instance, to do this, so that we retain the high frequencies but just lower them a little bit. That's not that bad. So, right? So we get. Cool. So that is, of course, the obvious use of this. On Electronaut's forum, there was actually someone who really dove into hi-hat synthesis and found all these different exact frequencies to dial in, like 606 hi-hat, 808 hi-hats, and so on. So you might want to look that up. It's pretty interesting, actually. So you can, if you want, you can search for these exact numbers and sort of recreate or estimate some of these classic hi-hats, which is pretty cool. Now, another use of this thing is if we set this to infinite, and sorry for the sharpness, but here we go. Ooh, okay, let's turn all these to 0, because now we get a little bit of a. I'm gonna take the edge off a little bit. So we get 6 oscillators that are operating with a huge high-pass filter on them, of course, but you can create some interesting textures with this. Radio signals, but also carefully picked tones. Like if I set them all to 0 and place this at 50, this at 100, and 200, and 400, and 800, and 1600. There we go. Ooh, it's very sharp, as you can hear. So definitely use some filtering. You can also use a bandpass filter, is nice for this. Send this through some reverb and delay. There we go. That's pretty cool, right? Of course, we can detune them a little bit to get some movement in there. That's pretty cool. As for textures, it's also quite nice, actually. Like so. Get all kinds of chirps, or just using one. Use the second LFO as another frequency modulation for the filter. And we can get some drops. Delay, reverb. So, lots to explore with that. Let's move on to the next thing. Euclidean. Let's get into Euclidean. I'm gonna mute the drops for now, make the snare a little bit shorter, and let's get into grid recording mode. And then on the second page of the trick page, so we have a second page now, we see you can turn on Euclidean mode on and off. If you're not familiar with Euclidean mode, basically it's a mathematic way of creating rhythms. What it does is you set an amount of steps. So that's literally just the sequence length that we can also change here. And we distribute an X amount of pulses as evenly as possible across those amount of steps, right? And in this case, we have 2 generators, and then we can rotate these pulses. So if we turn this on, I'm gonna set the length to 1 page for now, and add 1 pulse. 2 pills, 4 pills, 6 pills, etc. And we can rotate this while editing, these are yellow. When I let go, they become purplish, bluish. Now the second generator just adds triggers, and then we have this OR, this Boolean operator, which determines how these two generators are interacting with each other. So we can set it to OR, which means that it will play both of the generators' generated pulses. We can set it to XOR, which means if the pulses overlap from the second generator and the first generator, they will not be triggered. As you can see, boom, these are now all gone. If they don't overlap, they will be triggered. Then we have AND, which means it's basically the inverse of XOR, as you can see. They have to overlap for them to be triggered, to be, active. And then we have subtract, and that literally subtracts from the first generator the pulses from the second generator. So the second generator doesn't add pulses at all, it just subtracts when it overlaps with pulses from the first generator. And we can of course rotate this as well to create all kinds of interesting rhythms. I really like the Euclidean mode, and another cool thing about Euclidean mode is that we can actually also use Control-All in this. So if we go to the groove that I'm gonna play in its entirety at the end, so with this, I make sure that I have all the digital machines muted, so we only affect these. Now if I hold track and Control, I'm not touching length because these tracks have slightly different lengths, as you can see. That makes it interesting because now I can start adding pulses on those tracks. Because they have different lengths, those pulses will be spaced out differently. We create basically a completely new groove this way. I'm actually really liking this, so I'm gonna paste that. I'm actually gonna paste that over there. So very cool. Now, if I want to make this permanent, let's say I want the kicks that I now have programmed here to be converted to grid recording mode. I can press Func and turn off Euclidean mode, and it will convert back to grid recording mode and add these triggers. Now, another interesting thing is that it will remember, in whatever mode you are, if you add parameter locks, it will remember them. As you can see, in Euclidean mode, I have different parameter locks than in grid recording mode, which is pretty cool. So you can set up triggers in grid recording mode and add parameter locks and everything, then switch to Euclidean mode, create a completely different rhythm, completely different sequence with different parameter locks, and then switch between those two, which is super, super cool. And as you can see, it does remember. So if I change this, right, now it has a different sequence, and I switch back to grid recording mode, it remembers the state before that. So that is really cool. So you could actually create a sequence within a sequence and then use Euclidean mode on and off switch to switch between those to create little breaks. And definitely with Control-All, this becomes super interesting because you can sort of create an instant breakdown with a completely different sequence in the background with Euclidean mode. And this is actually something that I'm going to use in live situations for sure, because it's super interesting. So it's also an instant breakdown machine this way. Hope you like this new edition. I think this is really powerful and really, is welcome on the Syntakt. So let's move on to the next thing. Oh, let's get this synth duster. There's stuff on my Syntakt. There we go. Page looping and page selection. So if I go to grid recording mode, I can press and hold page and select a page to navigate to. And I can loop pages, any pages, and it will loop. And better yet, you can see that this is the actual point where the playhead is. So this it can be used in a live situation, where I can just loop this page now. Now get out of the loop and it will just jump where it was. Pretty cool. So that is the page looping. So another very nice little quality of life feature that is added is that we can now see, and you might have already seen this when I was messing around with Euclidean mode, but you can actually see on which pages there are parameter locks. Really nice. I like it. And also if it's micro time to the right or to the left. Another thing that is added is that we can now save triggers with all their parameter locks, etc., directly into our sound browser by pressing a trigger, holding it, and pressing the song mode button. We get into the save sound, and we can save it to the plus drive, or we can press left, view pool, and we can immediately save it to the pool. And last but not least, I guess, it's a small addition, but hey, it's nice, a nice have. Everything extra is nice, is welcome. On the BD Sharp machine, we now have a Squarewave. Those are the new additions, and here is the groove that I created. It's just 4 analog tracks, and I